Welcome to the Ultimate Sports Blog Podcast, Monday, October 29th, 2018. Before I get to NFL, the Browns, NBA, NHL, and college football extravaganza stuff, the Boston Red Sox are your 2018 World Series champions, 5-1 winners over the Los Angeles Dodgers in 5 games. The Red Sox were the best team in baseball from start to finish all season long. They deserved it. They earned it. David Price gets the win. Clayton Kershaw with the loss, a damaging loss to Clayton Kershaw's postseason. And David Price kind of on the opposite. It's like a better reputation. In other words, Kershaw not so great of a reputation now. It all started top of the first inning. 2-run home run to center field by Steve Pearce. 2-0 Sox. Bottom of the first. Home run David Price. That's the lone run the Dodgers would get in this game to make it a 2-1 game. First pitch from David Price, by the way. He settled down from there. Top of the 6th. Home run Mookie Betts. His first of the playoffs. His first career playoff home run, I believe. 3-1 Sox. Top of the 7th, a home run for JD Martinez, his first in Los Angeles, his 4th one career-wise off of Clayton Kershaw. I believe he had a home run in Game 1 of the series as well. 4-1 Sox. Top of the 8th, home run Steve Pearce, his 2nd of the game, his 3rd in 2 games, giving them a 5-1 lead for good. And there it is, the Red Sox are World Series champions. David Price, 7 innings, 3 hits, 1 earned run, 2 walks, 5 strikeouts. Had a 1.98 ERA in the World Series. Joe Kelly came out in the 8th, struck out the side. Chris Sale, bottom of the 9th, struck out the side. Clayton Kershaw's stat line, 7 innings, 7 hits, 4 earned runs, no walks, 5 strikeouts. Had an ugly World Series ERA of 7.36, and like I said, his reputation has been damaged a little bit. Pedro Baez came in for the 8th, gave up the home run to Pearce, and struck out 1 batter. Kenley Jansen pitched the 9th inning, gave up a walk. He didn't have a great World Series either. The World Series MVP was Steve Pearce. He had 3 homers in the series. Also had the biggest hit of the series, which was the bases clearing double off of Kenta Maeda in Game 4, the break Game 4 open for Boston. So he's deserving of this MVP. David Price also had an argument coming out of relief a couple times, getting some big outs, having the big start last night as well as Game 2. So you could have easily made a case for David Price. Meanwhile, Boston, congratulations. Like I said, well-deserved. And for the Dodgers, 2nd straight World Series loss. They're obviously going to be big game hunting this offseason. Tomorrow we'll do the offseason power rankings as every team stands into the offseason. But to give the Red Sox credit, they have, in all likelihood, the AL MVP on their team. A guy that was in contention for the AL Cy Young but missed a ton of time, and I'm talking about Chris Sale. David Price with the second half surge erased all of his demons because he had so many bad starts, including Game 2 against the Yankees in the postseason, meaning bad starts against the Yankees. He was good against everybody else. He shedded his failure postseason reputation this year. Meanwhile, Clayton Kershaw, as I mentioned the past couple minutes, really didn't shave his postseason. Failure is a strong word, but let's just say disappointment reputation for Kershaw. But, hey, like I said, Red Sox best team all year. This was well-deserved for them. All right, let's move on to football now. And it's obvious why I played Sweet Caroline to open up the podcast. It's because the Red Sox were the champs, so they had to get the respect that they deserve. Yesterday's outcomes in the NFL, the Eagles defeated the Jaguars 24-18. The Eagles are 4-4. Jacksonville's 3-5. Carson Wentz, 21 of 30, 286 yards, 3 touchdowns and a pick. Blake Bortles, 24 of 41, 286 yards and a touchdown. The Chiefs defeated the Broncos 30-23. The Chiefs are 7-1. Denver is 3-5. This was the first loss Kansas City had against the spread this year. Patrick Mahomes, 24-34, 4 TDs, 1 pick, 303 yards. Case Keenum, 23-34, 262 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. The Steelers defeated the Browns 33-18. The Steelers are 4-2-1. The Browns are 2-5-1. Ben Roethlisberger, 24-36, 257 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Baker Mayfield, 22-36, 180 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick, which led to the firing of Hugh Jackson and Todd Haley from Cleveland. I'll get into that in a couple of minutes. The Redskins defeated the Giants 20-13. Much needed win for the Redskins to hold off the other teams in first place in the NFC East. They're 5-2. The Giants are 1-7. Alex Smith, 20-32, 178 yards and a touchdown. Eli Manning, 30-47, 316 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. The Seahawks defeated the Lions 28-14. The Seahawks are 4-3. Detroit's 3-4. Russell Wilson, 14-17, 248 yards and 3 touchdowns. Matthew Stafford, 27-40, 310 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. The Bengals defeated the Bucs 37-34. The Bengals are 5-3. Good bounce-back win for them. Tampa Bay's 3-4. Andy Dalton, 21-34, 280 yards and 2 touchdowns. Jameis Winston was benched in this game. 4 picks with a touchdown pass, 276 yards, 18-35. Ryan Fitzpatrick off the bench, 11-15, 194 yards and 2 touchdowns. Led the Bucs comeback to nearly force overtime, but the defense couldn't get a big stop as the Bengals kicked the field goal to get the win. The Bears defeat the Jets 24-10. The Bears are 4-3. The Jets are 3-5. I should say the first place Bears now. We'll get more into the Vikings in a minute. Mitch Trubisky, 16-29, 220 yards and 2 touchdowns. Sam Darnold, 14-29, 153 yards and a touchdown. The Panthers defeated the Ravens 36-21. The Panthers are 5-2. Baltimore is 4-4. Big win for Carolina. Cam Newton, 21-29, 219 yards, 2 touchdowns. Joe Flacco, 22-39, 192 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. And Lamar Jackson, by the way, saw time in this game too. 4 of 5 for 46 yards and a touchdown pass. The Colts defeated the Raiders 42-28. The Colts are 3-5. Oakland's 1-6. Andrew Luck, 22 of 31, 239 yards and 3 touchdowns. Derek Carr, 21 of 28, 244 yards and 3 touchdowns. The Cardinals defeated the 49ers 18-15. The Cards are 2-6. San Francisco's 1-7. Josh Rosen, 23 of 40, 252 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. C.J. Beathard, 14 of 28, 190 yards, and a touchdown. The Rams defeated the Packers 29-27. The Rams are 8-0. The Packers are 3-1. Jared Goff, 19 of 35, 295 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers, 18 of 30, 286 yards, and a touchdown. The Saints defeated the Vikings 30-20. Impressive win for New Orleans. One of the best wins that any team will have this season, or at least certainly any contender, because Buffalo won in Minnesota, and Buffalo's not a contender. New Orleans is 6-1. Minnesota's 4-3-1. And it's hard to imagine that the Saints lost in Week 1 to the Bucs. It's going to go down as the flukiest loss any contenders had all season, and maybe even the Bills defeating the Vikings being the other one, assuming Minnesota rides the ship after a disappointing loss. Drew Brees, 18 of 23, 120 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Taysom Hill completed a pass for 44 yards in the game as well. Kirk Cousins, 31 of 41, 359 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. Tonight you have the Patriots and the Bills, 8:15 ESPN. Joe Tessitore and Jason Witten, Booger McFarland, Lisa Salters, all will be there. This is a bit of a tricky spot for New England, in my opinion, even though Buffalo is starting Derek Anderson, who is not a good quarterback and was out of the league for 10 years until Buffalo picked him up last week. And he was dreadful in their game against Indy. That's why I mistakenly said Indy, because they played Indy last week. And I just don't expect much from Anderson. But it wouldn't shock me if they made some drives down the field that resulted in 3 points rather than 7 points, because the New England Patriots defense is among the worst units of contenders this year. So, like I said when I made my pick, I would bet the over as well as the minus 13.5. That's what the line is right now. And I said that on Friday's podcast, and I still believe that the Pats will cover and the total will go over. And like I said, the tricky spot, but the caveat here is that Tom Brady has not lost in Buffalo since 2011 in a game where the Bills came from behind and won on a game-winning field goal. And I believe Steven Hauschka might have been the Bills' kicker at the time. That's what I think it was, but I really don't remember. It was 2011. But I just remember that game and being shocked that the Pats lost that game because they blew such a big lead, and their defense was bad that year too. That was the year that they ultimately went to the Super Bowl and lost to the Giants. The second time they lost to the Giants this century. But I do expect a good performance from Tom Brady and that offense. Julian Edelman another week healthier. I don't think Gronk is playing, but I still expect the Patriots to move the ball around and Tom Brady to look like the GOAT that he is on the field. Before we move on to NBA, the Cleveland Browns have fired Todd Haley, and before that they fired Hugh Jackson. There was a report out yesterday before the game saying that if the Browns had a bad performance, then somebody would be let go. The speculation was that it would be Todd Haley, but it ended up being both Haley and head coach Hugh Jackson. The intern coach now is defensive coordinator Greg Williams, and he certainly won't, or at least probably won't be the permanent head coach going forward. They'll probably go big game hunting and try to get a college coach in there or a competent coordinator to take over that job. And it's just funny because yesterday the Cavaliers fired Ty Lue and today the Browns fired Hugh Jackson. So when was the last time a sports market fired, or the last time a sports market, two different teams let go of their coaches within 2 days of each other, let alone a week? I know the Knicks, Rangers, Giants, and Yankees all changed coaches within like a 6-month span, because I remember last October the Yankees fired Joe Girardi. Last December the Giants fired Ben McAdoo. Oh, and even Terry Collins with the Mets too, so it's 5 New York teams that changed coaches. Oh, 6, the Islanders. So there were 6 New York teams that changed coaches within like a 9-month span. September the Mets fired Collins. October the Yankees fired Joe Girardi. The Giants fired Ben McAdoo in December last year. Might have actually been November. And the Knicks fired Jeff Hornacek in April, and the Rangers fired Alain Vigneault in April, and the Islanders fired their coach in April as well. So that is at least 6 coaches in an 8-month span in one city. But 2 coaches in a 2-day span is very rare for a city. And speaking of the Cavs, we're going to talk a little NBA now. The Warriors defeated the Nets 120-114. Warriors are 6-1. Brooklyn's 2-4. Stephen Curry 35 points, 7 boards, 3 assists. Klay Thompson 18 points, 5 boards. Kevin Durant 34 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists. Draymond Green had a weird stat line: 8 points, 4 rebounds, 13 assists. D'Angelo Russell had a great game: 25 points, 6 boards, 6 assists. Karis LeVert 23 points, 3 boards, 7 assists. Jared Allen 11 points, 3 boards, 4 assists. Allen Crabbe off the bench 14 points, 5 boards, 2 assists. Spencer Dinwiddie off the bench 12 points and a board. The Thunder are finally in the win column. 117-110 over the Utah Jazz. Much needed win for Oklahoma City. They're 1-4. Phoenix is 1-5. Russell Westbrook 23 points, 9 boards and 7 assists. Paul George 23 points, 4 boards, 5 assists. Nerlens Noel getting the start at center. 20 points, 15 boards, 2 assists. Jeremy Grant, 14 points, 4 boards, and an assist. Dennis Schroeder off the bench, 12 points, 4 boards, 7 assists. Patterson, 17 points, 4 boards off the bench. DeAndre Ayton, 16 points, 11 boards. Ryan Anderson, 15 points, 5 boards. TJ Warren off the bench, 18 points, 8 boards. Elliot Colbo off the bench, 18 points, 5 boards, 7 assists. The Jazz defeated the Mavericks 113-104, so good job by the Jazz avoiding a trap game. They're 4-2. Dallas is 2-4. Rudy Gobert, 23.16 boards. Donovan Mitchell, 20 points. Jay Crowder, 15 points. Joe Ingles, 12.7 boards, 5 assists. Gorgas Niang, 13 points off the bench. Garrett Allen off the bench, 11 points. Dennis Smith Jr., 27 points. Wes Matthews, 22 points and 7 boards. Luka Doncic, 14 points, 6 boards, 5 assists, so he had a nice all-around game. DeAndre Jordan, 12 points, 19 boards. The Clippers defeated the Wizards 136-104. Impressive win for the Clippers as they go to 4-2. Washington's 1-5. The Wizards are a mess. I'm surprised that it wasn't their coach that got fired. Oh, wait. I shouldn't be surprised that the Cavs fired Tyronn Lue. That's a dysfunctional organization. But if I had to make a next coach fired bet, it's definitely Scotty Brooks. Bradley Beal, 20.7 boards. John Wall, 18 points, 3 boards, 5 assists. Jan Mahimny got the start at center, 11.7 boards. Meanwhile, for the Clippers, Tobias Harris had a double-double. 22 points, 11 boards. Danilo Gallinari, 11.7 boards. Avery Bradley, 15 points. Patrick Beverley, 11 points, 4 boards, 4 assists. Montrezl Harrell off the bench, 13.6 boards. Boban Marjanovic off the bench, 13 points, 9 boards. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander off the bench, had a great game. 10 points, 8 boards, 7 assists. Mike Scott off the bench, 11 points, 3 boards. 3 3-pointers. So a nice win for the Clippers that they can hang their hat on right now. Tonight's slate at 7 o'clock, you have the Blazers and the Pacers. The Hawks and the 76ers. Philly has to be careful a little bit because that could be a little bit of a trap spot as their game against Orlando, I believe it was last week, kind of proved. And Orlando is better than the Hawks, but the Hawks have been a little better than I thought. They came back to beat Dallas. Maybe I'm just judging the Hawks because of how bad they looked against the Knicks on opening night. But they've looked much better since then. Philly better look out. Blazers, Pacers, the Blazers. This is a nice opportunity here for them to get an upset win on the road. I think they have a chance there, but Indy's just better right now. 7:30 of the Kings and the Heat. An overachieving Kings team against the Heat team that is playing really well right now. You have the second meeting of the season between the Nets and the Knicks. Both of these teams have not been very good. The Knicks have been competitive in most of their games other than that Miami game, in which I think they were just looking ahead to the Warriors a little bit. And meanwhile, the Brooklyn Nets kept the Warriors close too, so they deserve credit for that. But at the Garden, I expect the Knicks to get their second victory of the season. You have, at 8 o'clock, the Warriors and the Bulls. This is a possible trap game for Golden State. They survived 2 of them against the 2 New York teams. Let's see if they survive against the Bulls, who picked off Charlotte last week, picked off Atlanta. So they've been a little better than I thought, too. Certainly Zach LaVine. And what was supposed to be the marquee game of the night at 8 o'clock, the Raptors and the Bucks, the 2 6-0 teams, are resting their star players. It's inexplicable from a Toronto standpoint why they're resting Kawhi. Meanwhile, Giannis is in a concussion protocol. That's a different story. But now with both superstars out, I expect the Raptors to win that game in Milwaukee because they're just a better team without Kawhi Leonard than the Bucks are better. I mean, the Bucks without Giannis Antetokounmpo are worse than the Raptors without Kawhi Leonard. That's what I'm saying. So I expect the Raptors to go out and win that game and remain undefeated. I expect Kyle Lowry and the rejuvenated Serge Ibaka lead the way there. And it'll prove why Giannis Antetokounmpo is the MVP, at least of the Eastern Conference right now. I think the MVP of the NBA right now should be Anthony Davis. 8 o'clock on NBA TV is the Lakers and the Timberwolves. Oof. One mess against a possible mess, depending on the result of this game. The possible mess being the Lakers. If they lose this game, it's going to be a disaster, and people are going to be calling for Luke Walton. It's just a messy time in Los Angeles with the Dodgers losing the World Series. I mean, the Rams are good, so they have that going for them. And then USC's a mess right now. They'll probably fire Clay Helton soon. So, yeah, Lakers under a little bit of pressure in Minnesota against the mess that is the Minnesota Timberwolves, and Jimmy Butler trying to get his way out of there. So LeBron and company better take advantage there. That's certainly the team under the most pressure tonight, the Los Angeles Lakers. And then you have the Mavericks and the Spurs at 8:30. Spurs got to avoid a trap there. The Pelicans and the Nuggets at 9 o'clock. That's a nice one. You better see Anthony Davis out there. Concerning why Denver's a 9.5-point favorite, I guess Anthony Davis isn't playing. But if he was, I expect the Nuggets to win, but I expect New Orleans to hang around. And before I get to hockey, it was just announced that the Mets have hired their new general manager. Drew Van Wagenen, he's an agent. And I think it's a surprising hire. I think they should have gone out and gotten somebody with baseball experience, but they didn't. We'll see how this works out, and I'll talk about this on future podcasts coming up. So to hockey we go. There was 6 games yesterday. The Kings defeated the Rangers 4-3 on a last-second goal by Alec Martinez. Ironically enough, Alec Martinez was the player that scored the game-winning goal in the Stanley Cup Final against the Rangers in 2014. So bad memories for the current Ranger players that were on that 2014 team, like Henrik Lundqvist, especially Henrik Lundqvist. And then Matt Zuccarello was on that team, Chris Kreider. But meanwhile, the Kings absolutely had to have this game. They are in a bit of trouble here. They're certainly a team that it's not rebuilding, unlike the Rangers. So both teams are now 3-7-1. And the number 1 star with a goal and 2 assists, Ilya Kovalchuk. The number 2 started the game with a goal, captain of the Kings, Dustin Brown. Number 3 started the game with a goal and an assist, Tony DeAngelo. The Red Wings defeat the Stars 4-2. The Red Wings are 2-7-2. The Stars are 5-5, so trap game for the Stars, and they get trapped. And it was their first home win of the year for the Red Wings. Number 1 star of the game, 28 saves on 30 shots, Jonathan Bernier. The number 2 star of the game with the goal, Anthony Mantha. The number 3 star of the game with a goal, Tyler Bertuzzi. The Islanders defeat the Hurricanes 2-1. Good win for the Isles. They're 5-4-1. Carolina's 6-4-1. The number 1 star of the game with 38 saves on 39 shots, Thomas Greiss. The number 2 star of the game with a goal, Ryan Pulock. And the number 3 star of the game with an assist, Sebastian Aho. The Oilers defeated the Blackhawks 2-1 in overtime. A great win for Todd McClellan and the Oilers as they go to 6-3-1. They've had a nice little turnaround after the slow start. And Chicago drops to 6-3-3, so they're regressing a little bit after their hot start. Connor McDavid got the overtime goal, and he was the number 1 star of the game. The number 2 star of the game with the goal, Brett Seabrook. And the number 3 star of the game with 31 saves on 32 shots, Cam Talbot. The Golden Knights defeated the Senators 4-3 in overtime. Much needed win for the Vegas Golden Knights. They're 5-5-1. Ottawa's 4-4-2. The number 1 star of the game with 2 goals, Alec Tuck. The number 2 star of the game with the overtime goal, Jonathan Marchessault. The number 3 star of the game, 49 saves on 53 shots, Craig Anderson. He's the sole reason why this game went to overtime. No fault whatsoever for the Golden Knights. You got to give Anderson credit for keeping Ottawa in this game, and he's a big reason why this team has overachieved so far to start the season. And I wouldn't be shocked if the Senators went into tank mode, and if he's a name traded at the deadline. I actually picked before the season that he'd be traded to the Flyers to upgrade their situation in net. The Flyers are off to a slow start, which is very surprising to me. The Sharks defeat the Ducks 4-3 in overtime. Good win for San Jose. They're 6-3-2. Anaheim's 5-5-2. Don't forget the Ducks defeated the Sharks on opening night. It's a little bit of a revenge game for San Jose. The number one star of the game, 2 goals and assists, including the overtime winner, Timo Meier. The number 2 star of the game with 2 goals, Pontus Aberg. And the number 3 star of the game with 2 assists, Ryan Getzlaf. Only 2 games on the slate tonight. At 7 o'clock, you have the Flames and the Maple Leafs. And at 10 o'clock, you have the Wild and the Canucks. How I'm going to do this week's power rankings on tomorrow's podcast is going to be different. I'm going to do how ESPN does its college football playoff ranking revealing and go from 25 to 7. And that's going to be my predictions on how the college football playoff first rankings will play out. Then I'll do 1 through 6. And then I'll go from 26 to 130. So it's going to be a fun way to do the power rankings tomorrow. And before I go, I'm going to do guess the lines for week 10. Unbelievable that we're at week 10 of the college season already. We're going to start with Kent State at Bowling Green. I have Bowling Green as a 4.5-point choice over Kent State. Bowling Green is -1. Miami of Ohio at Buffalo. I have Buffalo -15. Buffalo's -7. Wednesday, Ball State at Toledo. I have Toledo -12. Toledo's -17. Northern Illinois at Akron. I have Northern by 7, and they're favored by 5. Ohio at Western Michigan. Western Michigan by 2.5. They're favored by 2. Temple at UCF. I have UCF by 14.5. UCF's by 10.5. Pittsburgh at Virginia. I have Virginia -7. Virginia's -7.5. Western Kentucky at Middle Tennessee. I have Middle by 13.5. And that's what the line is. So that's my first correct pick of the podcast. Colorado at Arizona. I have Arizona by 3. Arizona by 4. Saturday's games. Louisville at Clemson. I have Clemson by 33. Clemson's favored by 37.5. Nebraska at Ohio State. I have the Buckeyes by 31.5. They're favored by 20.5. I think that's low. Syracuse at Wake. I have that as a pick'em. And Syracuse is favored by 4.5. A&M at Auburn. I have Auburn by 7. Auburn's favored by 5.5. South Carolina at Ole Miss. I have Ole Miss by 2.5. That's a pick'em. Rutgers at Wisconsin. I have Wisconsin by 37.5. They're favored by 30. Michigan State at Maryland. I have Sparty by 3. Sparty's favored by 2. Oklahoma State at Baylor. I have OK State by 7. OK State's favored by 8. Iowa State at Kansas. I have Iowa State by 16.5. Iowa State's favored by 14.5. Air Force at Army. I have Army by 15.5. Army's favored by 7. Memphis at East Carolina. I have Memphis by 15.5. Memphis is favored by 12.5. Oh, I'm sorry, I had it at 13.5, so I was 1 point off there. Central Michigan at Eastern Michigan. I have Eastern by 10. Eastern's favored by 13.5. Georgia Tech at North Carolina. I have Tech by 8.5. Tech's favored by 4.5. Texas State at Georgia State. I have Georgia State by 10.5. They're favored by 6.5. San Jose State at Wyoming. I have Wyoming by 8. Wyoming's favored by 13.5. South Alabama at Arkansas State. I have Arkansas State by 14. They're favored by 16. Georgia Southern at UL Monroe. I have UL Monroe by 3.5. UL Monroe is getting 7.5. That is ridiculous. Marshall at Southern Miss. I have Miss by 3. Marshall's by 3. Georgia at Kentucky. I have Georgia by 6.5. Georgia's favored by 9.5. I think that's a little high. West Virginia at Texas. I have Texas by 3. Texas is favored by 2. Iowa at Purdue. I have Purdue -3, and that's what the line is. That's my second correct pick on the podcast. Liberty at UMass. I have Liberty by 2.5. UMass is favored by 3. UTEP at Rice. I have Rice by 3. UTEP's favored by 1.5. That's like the worst game of the year on paper. Tulane at South Florida. I have South Florida by 13.5. They're favored by 7.5. Navy at Cincinnati. I have Cincinnati by 15.5. Cincinnati's favored by 13.5. Louisiana at Troy. I have Troy by 16. Troy's favored by 10. Florida State at NC State. I have NC State by 13.5. NC State's only favored by 7. Kansas State at TCU. I have TCU by 8.5. TCU's favored by 8. Minnesota at Illinois. Illinois getting 12.5, and they're getting 9.5. That's low. Penn State at Michigan. I have Michigan by 7. Michigan's laying 10. That's a little high. Boston College at Virginia Tech. I have Boston College by 2.5. That's what the line is. So that's a third correct pick on the podcast. Missouri at Florida. I have the Gators by 12. The Gators are laying 6. Utah at Arizona State. I have Utah by 4.5. Utah's by 7. Charlotte at Tennessee. I have Tennessee by 27. Tennessee is laying 21. Alcorn State, New Mexico State doesn't get a pick because that's an FCS school in Alcorn. But I did see a line, and I didn't make a pick for it. New Mexico State's favored by 18. I would have picked New Mexico State by 25, so I would have been 7 points off. Appalachian State at Coastal Carolina. I have App State by 6. App State's favored by 14. That's too high. Houston at SMU. I have Houston by 11.5. Houston's favored by 13.5. Connecticut at Tulsa. I have Tulsa by 18.5. Tulsa's favored by 17.5. Duke at Miami. I have Miami by 7. Miami's favored by 8. Notre Dame at Northwestern. I have Notre Dame by 14. Notre Dame's favored by 8. Louisiana Tech at Mississippi State. I have Mississippi State by 20.5. They're favored by 21. UCLA at Oregon. I have Oregon by 17. Oregon's favored by 10.5. FAU at FIU. FAU I have favored by 5. FIU is favored by 3.5. UTSA at UAB. I picked UAB to be favored by 8.5. UAB is actually favored by 21.5, so that's a way off on that. Alabama at LSU. The game of next weekend. I picked Alabama to be favored by 14, and Alabama is favored by 14. So that's my fourth correct pick on the podcast. Oklahoma at Texas Tech. I have the Sooners by 8.5. The Sooners are favored by 10. Stanford at Washington. I have Washington by 7. Washington's favored by 9.5. USC at Oregon State. I made this line pick in a little bit of an overreaction to USC losing at home to Arizona State and Oregon State beating Colorado on the road. I have the Trojans laying 10. The Trojans are laying 14. BYU at Boise. I have Boise minus 18.5, and Boise's laying 13.5. San Diego State at New Mexico. I have the Aztecs laying 13. They're laying 10.5. Fresno at UNLV. I picked Fresno minus 15.5. Fresno's laying 24.5, so I was way off there. Cal at Washington State. I have Washington State minus 8.5. Washington State's laying 10.5. And last but not least, I picked Utah State to be laying 10 at Hawaii. They're laying 18, so I was a little off there. So 4 guesses with the lines correct, and that's pretty good for the week. That's it for the podcast. Tomorrow I'll be doing the NFL Power Rankings and guess lines for that. I'll be doing my playoff prediction rankings. Well, I should say the rankings predictions. And then do my college football power rankings along with it, as I talked about a couple minutes ago on the podcast. And obviously I'll recap the NBA and NHL action, go over tomorrow's slate of games, and anything else that happens in the world of sports. I hope you guys have a great day, everybody.